Overwatch 2 is melting. Or at least that's what it looked like about a week ago when a long-awaited ranked overhaul and the biggest balance patch ever released to the game went live. These brought in some incredibly controversial changes, especially for an FPS. Overall, this update is a hard reset. The game plays differently, the notoriously bad ranked system has been changed completely, and everyone's rank has also been reset. I know you guys are probably here for the controversial stuff. They basically gave everyone in the game aim assist. Bullets and projectiles are bigger across the board, and no, this is not just for console, it is for PC as well. This is unprecedented. I have never heard of a first-person multiplayer shooter doing something like this. You're probably thinking, no one wants to get shit on by someone with worse aim than them, which is true. Nobody wants that. But it is playing out a bit different to how you might think. There are definitely issues with this update, but they're not issues I'm seeing anyone talk about. Before we get to that, let's look at what it's doing right. This video will focus mainly on the balance changes. Ranked is now very clear and communicates to the player well, grouping with friends is easier, and there are new rewards to earn. These changes are just good. Ultimately though, inside of a match, it's the balance changes here that matter. And there's a lot of good there too. The goal of this patch is to deliver a more consistent feel to firing and landing your shots on your opponents, lessen the impacts of burst damage to allow for greater counterplay, and adjust where in-game healing and damage are effective to reduce stagnant team fights. They also talk about this in another developer blog. Basically, it's hard to hit shots, burst damage and healing are too high, and DPS is a cosmetic role. So how did they address these issues? The size of every bullet and projectile has been increased. Every hero in the game has received 25 to 100 health depending on who they are. DPS heroes have a new role-wide passive that applies a 20% healing reduction for 2 seconds. And although it's exceedingly minor, there is now a global healing passive, kind of like when you take damage in Call of Duty, that applies to all roles when it used to only apply to support. They still have the best version of it though. Look, quite surprisingly, this is going down really well with the community, which is insanely positive considering how elitist the insular ranked grinding crowd of Overwatch 2 is. These guys can basically be seen as the crazies who stuck around when Overwatch 1 was dead because they were so addicted to ranked. And even they are loving the aim assist changes. And honestly, what is not to like? Buffing projectile sizes just works. Overwatch is a hard game to aim in. I hate admitting it, but it is the only AAA multiplayer FPS on the market that is still alive and doesn't have any movement acceleration. I cannot stress how big that is. If you don't know what movement acceleration is, it is a mechanic in the skeleton of a game that slows a player down when they change direction. And Overwatch doesn't have that. Because movement is so snappy, it is notoriously difficult to hit someone, and it feels exceptionally corny when a skinny character like Kiriko just spams the AD keys in front of you. And that is before you layer in any abilities, shields, movement, ultimates, etc. Overwatch requires flicking, tracking, prediction, 360-degree aiming, but it is the multiplayer FPS game on the market right now where aim matters the least. If you'd like to hear more about this topic in depth, I highly recommend this video because it unpacks it brilliantly and it is very hard to disagree with. Now, none of this is to downplay how seriously concerning it was for the devs to give everyone aim assist when it feels amazing to have good aim in this game. The problem is, it just doesn't play out like that. Because everyone has more health, which we'll talk about in a sec, you need to have consistently good aim more so than before. You can still viscerally feel the difference between good and bad aim. And for most people, myself included, 1v1 duels that I thought would be ruined by aim assist were actually always just as dependent on positioning, timing, and ability usage. And it feels like that is unchanged. This solution really is that good. It's the secret sauce of the game that makes it tick, and it is better for it. And the good doesn't stop at the projectile buffs. The changes to health pools are doing a lot of heavy lifting. 2 complaints since and even before Overwatch 2's launch have been, I'm sick of getting one-shotted, or I can't fucking kill anything. Overwatch has felt very League of Legends-y in that damage and healing is so inflated, both teams kind of just stare at each other until someone fucks up, and then the game can actually begin in earnest. Giving everyone 25 to 100 health is an amazing change to finally dispense with the first issue, one-shots. Not all one-shots, but we will talk about that later. More health means more uptime for damage dealers in a fight, which means it's harder to keep everyone healed up as much. This compounds even harder with the new DPS passive. Damage heroes can stay in a fight longer, hit more shots, and directly reduce the effectiveness of healing. Thank f***. If someone was going to receive 500 healing in a fight, just by virtue of applying this new passive, you've done a free 100 damage. That is perhaps the best aspect of this season. The DPS role has truly returned to its former glory, and the devs themselves have admitted there's a lot more DPS popularity now at higher ranks as a result. If you love playing DPS, this is your patch. Play it now. The last notable positive for me is the global self-healing passive. It rests a tiny bit of the healing responsibility of supports away from the role. It is exceedingly minor, but it is philosophically good. Support heroes have historically run rampant throughout the game, as they've essentially been designed to provide exceptional healing output and damage output and utility. They need to be able to float between more responsibilities than the other roles. This is why everyone has been saying supports are OP for ages. Reducing their healing responsibility makes room to stabilize this power budget. I'd like to wrap up this section with a little exercise. Basically, you can view all these changes as a massive W in a controversial hero like Kiriko. She's been one of, if not the most, talked about hero in the community when it comes to being broken. The reasons for this can be boiled down to 5 frustrating mechanics to play against. These are an exceptionally skinny hitbox, projectile spam that can kill you in 2 hits, the ability to escape from any fight or appear out of thin air and ruin a 1v1, a no-skill AoE immortality ability that can nullify ultimates, and the ability to wall climb. It's pretty f***ing offensive. But she is almost literally solved by this patch. More health means she cannot kill you near instantly. Her hitbox has been fixed by the aim assist changes. Because she's easier to hit, her cooldowns can be forced directly from her. And her Suzu will also get forced more often because healing is worse and cooldowns need to be committed to negate regular damage. Overall, fantastic. Well done, devs. What the f***? The issue is, not every hero is Kiriko, and that is where the cracks have started to form. I actually wrote so much for this section that I've had to rewrite this f***ing video 4 times now. Basically, you can see this patch as a magnificent band-aid, but a band-aid solution is not exactly effective for a game like Overwatch that contains heroes like Wrecking Ball and Ana side by side. So let's go back through the changes and look at the negatives and those that are maybe still developing too. Starting with aim assist, there almost aren't any negatives. I truly believe it is pretty good on its own. One-shot kills and projectile weapons, though, were previously designed around being inconsistent. Heroes like Hanzo and Widowmaker wouldn't hit many shots out of 100, but that was okay because maybe 5 to 10 of them would net them a kill. Now that they've been made way more consistent, they must be nerfed or reworked to fit this vision of Overwatch gameplay. Or they won't fit. It's actually arguable that one-shots are way more frustrating now. Widow headshots still instantly kill. When the entire game has been pushed towards giving you more time to react, this sticks out more like a sore thumb. It's a compounding effect of why one-shots have been a pain point for the community for so long. Overwatch feels incredibly good to move around in, deal damage, and heal. The responsiveness and dopamine loop is S+ tier. It is that good. One-shots short-circuit that loop completely. It is a slap in the face that sends you back to the spawn room before you can react, or frankly, counterplay it on most of the cast. Now, I am not saying less one-shots across the board is bad, but I am saying the remaining one-shots are more of a prickly pear now. A hero like Junkrat, who lost his one-shot combo, suffers super hard here. He was incredibly reliant on this combo and instead now just has weaker, bigger grenades. If they won't bring back his one-shot, they may be forced to buff him in areas that were never designed to be the epicenter of Junkrat's value. Would they give him faster firing, speedier, bigger grenades? Well, what's the point of hit scan if his projectiles become that reliable? Many changes you can think of would make him an even more oppressive tank buster. Cat's kind of out of the bag with this one. You could try and let Junkrat just be an oddball in his niche, but he'd need his one-shot back, and because of how easy it would be to execute with his big projectiles, I don't see it. He's kind of just ruined. And you can say all of that is my opinion, but I'm right. But I have the receipts. The first balance hotfix patch we received a week into this season has confirmed a lot of this. The devs are trying to find avenues in which to buff Junkrat. I cannot wait to be concussion mined and have my keyboard ripped away from me this frequently as a tank. And you can see they're glad they didn't take the cat out of the bag with Widow's one-shot because she is back. She's got more health than last patch, and they've given her more range. Her low health and shorter range she was at were the two factors that finally kept her almost in check for the first time in ever. I cannot understate how fucking under the radar this has been flying. They really fucking brought Widowmaker back. She was hated for years, and they really made this fucking mistake. Oh my god! I'm gonna pass out. Let me elaborate on this a bit. It is good that Widow has to charge her shot for longer to one shot because everyone has more health. Dive is also better this patch, so jumping on Widow is more valuable, but none of this has anything to do with some of the worst aspects of playing into her. The positives are vastly offset by her range increase, which better allows for her to hold an angle at full charge and one-shot you before you have time to react. You know, the reason for the health buffs. And it further entrenches her problematic glory on long-range maps, some of the most hated maps in the community. The problematic designs also don't start and end with a few DPS heroes. Because of the net nerf to healing, heal botting is useless this patch. Lifeweaver is ruined. I have little faith that devs will do something other than buff his healing numbers because it's almost the only value he provides. So when the bar has been raised for how much healing is effective, Lifeweaver will either be bad or need healing buffs. And then we're back in Season 8. There is a third option. Rework his kit to focus on things other than healing. You know, what his original design was made for. He was supposed to be a utility support, and they abandoned that idea, which by the way was fucking disastrous. 3-minute long team fights, anybody? So fucking sick. Fuck me. Many tank designs may now be broken too. Just like Junkrat or Lifeweaver, if the bar for effective output has been raised, then tank designs like Zarya and Roadhog, who rely heavily upon the threat of dealing damage to be tanks, become a problem for the vision of this patch. Zarya just received damage buffs in the hotfix. I can't fucking wait for a counter-swapping Cornelius to just stare at me with the big beam he's got this patch. The changes they just brought out for Hog mirror what's happening with Junkrat. They won't bring higher one-shot burst damage back to him, so they're looking for areas to buff him that could break his design completely. Take a Breather is now a toggleable Orisa Fortify. What the fuck? By now, you can probably see the picture I'm painting of old issues becoming entrenched and the devs not being equipped to deal with those issues. But we're not done yet. I haven't even talked about the DPS passive. I will say, I still think it's pretty good for the game. First off, it isn't tailored to every hero. You might be thinking, so what, it's good. Even you said it's good. Yeah, just wait, hold on. The last round of role passives was untailored and fundamentally broken. Pretty much because it was untailored. The support passive had a seriously bad cascade effect of support balance issues like Ana. Because she didn't have to use her cooldowns to heal herself, she could spam them on the front line endlessly. Hence the I'm sick of being anti-nated on tank rhetoric that's been around since fucking Season 1, and Hanzo didn't get the last DPS passive because he doesn't reload. In terms of the new passive, some DPS heroes benefit way more from it. Ashe's Dynamite basically works as a budget anti-nade and multiplies its suppressive effect. Over time, is that just going to prove too good and force the devs to nerf other parts of her kit? Will she just become a Dynamite bot, or will other heroes be power crept to meet this level of value? This patch almost seemed like it was going to make balance easier, but they have added an extra layer of shit. Really, the issue here is that the devs are tripping themselves up by saying they won't adjust the passive.
We're not going to touch any numbers of the DPS passive right now.
They'll have to put more finesse into balancing around it, and their balance work is not great.
They don't know how to nerf. Anyone that's followed the game long enough knows the trend has always been something breaks, they fail attempts at nerfing, and they either change the rules of the game or introduce something more broken.
It's also unfortunate that it seemed like the devs wanted this to be the teamwork patch. By giving DPS this new anti-heal passive, teams would seemingly shift towards focus firing targets together. Bit of docking action. Bit of docking.
Bruh.
Let me cut to the chase on this one. Unless you're in GM, this isn't fucking happening. This actually hasn't changed at all. Most players in most ranks are gonna shoot what they're gonna shoot and stay out of voice chat and report each other.
It does work in some places though.
When I've off-rolled outside of Masters games at Plat or even lower, there is a distinct difference in the core gameplay of Overwatch. One target is always stared at by everyone on both teams. It's time. to talk about tanks. Tanks have a slower time to kill on most targets now. Immediately, you can feel this patch that you have less impact. You don't apply the DPS passive, and many tanks did not get damage buffs. Killing supports is a joke as a tank. This is because supports weren't nerfed directly. You have less agency and are more reliant on your entire team than ever before.
Tank is now the weakest role in Overwatch. You're almost like the quarterback, but you can't throw the ball. Your only thing is you hand the ball off now.
As a way to help illustrate my unbiased opinion on the topic, I am a Junker Queen one trick. Some tanks were given damage buffs and even armor to compete and stay relevant when engaging on a tankier backline. A backline that all has plus 50 HP. Look at Reinhardt. It takes him just as many swings as last patch to kill a squishy. He also got armor. The threat Reinhardt projects when he is in an ideal spot is steeper. It doesn't stop there. Practically every tank that could be used to brainlessly tank bully or stare at you now has an easier time doing so. You might have thought, Brian buffs are fine. He needed them. But how do you feel about Orisa getting 75 armor, now having no fall off damage and bigger projectiles? What about a Roadhog with now 800 HP and more damage resistance? What about a Zarya with more health and damage? How do you kill this fucking thing? I can still kill her, I'm that good, but it is worse. All of this patch is made worse for self-healing tanks. Junker Queen has less uptime and less effective damage in every tank duel. Now, despite all that, many people are rating her quite highly because of the changes to her knife. That got affected by the projectile size buffs. If you can get value with it, she is pretty good.
You basically just all in really, really quick, try to hit someone with a knife, pull them in your team, and just execute them super, super quick.
But it does feel that the situations in which she can get value have been cut down. She is less versatile. Like I said earlier, you have less agency. And that is the problem. This patch is a massive confirmation of counter swap meta. If you're in a matchup where on paper you're at a disadvantage, that disadvantage has become entrenched on tanks. This is true even more so when the enemy team and not just the tank counter swap you, because no defensive support cooldowns were nerfed, which notoriously would be used to deny taking space, looking for kills and playmaking.
The counter swap game is worse now because it's not just counter the tank, there's now like a formulaic equation.
The last couple seasons have felt like supports were unkillable gods and incredibly threatening to push up on. It now also feels a little bit like that when approaching DPS heroes.
It's like, what the fuck, man?
People keep saying tanks need a more unique passive, which I agree with. They could also try and solidify the focus firing vision of this update by splitting the DPS passive up between tanks and DPS. What if tanks got 10% anti-healing applied on damage they deal and DPS got the other 10%, and together they scissored, and they scissored to make 20%? This would solidify a new niche and way to get value for tanks balanced upon dishing out damage instead of living through it. But again, it would disproportionately affect certain heroes and create unfortunate balance ripples that are in the hands of the Overwatch balance team. I would like to caveat here that this patch does overall feel like a decent return to rewarding proactivity, kind of, which does go hand in hand with a lot of tank gameplay. But this is sort of a more nebulous idea that I feel is still taking shape among the community as they learn this patch. You can definitely see it keenly amongst defensive support players not liking the changes. If it does eventually work out and tank magically feels better in a season or so without major changes, it will be by accident and not design. More of a broken clock being right twice a day game balance situation. It's also worth noting how much of a staple Sigma is this patch. I'm not saying he's more of a staple than in the past, but tanks that can simply survive in a somewhat self-sufficient manner have become very favorable. Wrecking Ball of all tanks this patch has also reached everyone's S tier on their tier lists because he fits into the new meta and also doesn't die.
Now, Wrecking Ball was the S tier pick before the hotfix patch. I would say he's A tier. He is very much unkillable.
It feels like another season of everyone shit on the tank. And though I might pay to have that happen, being proactive does seem to actually just mean going along for the ride as your DPS carry you, either by diving on Winston or having a Lucio speed boost your 750 HP meatball body into the firing line. This patch is a major catch-22. The wide sweeping changes have entrenched several problem heroes as balance issues. Burst and high damage dealers will pull balance towards making them do what they were built for, or they will have to be rebuilt. Need I remind you how many seasons it took for Sombras and Hogs reworks? Tank is objectively the loser of this patch, counter-swapping somehow got worse, and the devs have hopped back onto old patterns of lopsided and inconsistent balance hotfixes. I would actually view the projectile buff buffs, health changes, and passives as systems level changes and not game balance. They strike me as more similar to the shift to 6v6 role lock and 5v5. The actual hero balance on a hero to hero basis needs serious improvement. Your immediate response to that may be, yeah, well, we're only like a week and a half in. We were just 8 seasons in and still getting dog shit balance patches then too, bro. They've slapped a big band-aid of novelty onto Overwatch that will obscure issues in the short term. Let me level with you here. That novelty is good. A takeaway from this video is that the systems level changes they've added are absolutely helping the game travel on an upward trend. I do highly recommend it. However, the problem for Overwatch 2's gameplay has always been the long-term balance philosophy. Now, as much as I would love to dive into 20 more minutes of yapping about that philosophy, you know, buffing every fucking number in the game up instead of just biting the bullet and nerfing healing for once in their lives, we're out of time. Let me know if you would like to see that video soon. Catch me on twitch.tv/GallusOW on my shieldless, matrixless, shirtless tank villain arc, or hear me yap about the game in an uncircumcised manner.
Thanks for watching!